Welcome to Modern Fullstack, a place to learn about building cloud native products with modern technologies. We have started with one large course, MFS 401, where we have 5 modules, 20 chapters, and more than 80 lessons. In this particular course, we would like to learn about how to build scalable and production ready large applications with some of the modern technologies in cloud native domain. That means we will focus on AWS, the Amazon Web Services, and some of the tools from AWS like DynamoDB for database, AWS Lambda for serverless paradigm, and we will also use TypeScript as a programming language and GraphQL for API development, and for the front end, we will use React. For this particular course, the 20 chapters are divided into 5 distinct modules, and we have a huge focus, which we would say more than 50% of the course is actually hands-on project where we will build a large application itself from the learnings we have from this particular course. In the introduction to the course, we discuss the motivations of the course and what we will learn from it, but also more importantly, we discuss the 4 key principles of lean product development. These include: it has to be cloud native, it has to be, whenever we can, we will use managed services. All services we will use will follow a pay-per-use model, which means we will not pay for just to having the service, and we will pay only per the use. And the application has to be scalable without any intervention. The tech stacks that we discussed are also discussed in detail here, why those are popular, what are the opportunities in terms of jobs and building new projects and new companies, new products out of this. And for each of those tech stacks, we actually go through in detail. Now you can see in the top, you can go through all the chapters like this. In this particular introduction, we also set up the developer environment, we set up the AWS itself, but more importantly, on top of that, we also have 20 chapters, and starting from learning TypeScript, and then there are 2 chapters, chapters 3 and 4, about learning React and state management with React hooks. We will not go through all the chapters in the details, but we will highlight how we teach the course and how we actually make sure that the self-paced learning is fulfilling and not just straight videos or not just simple blogs. Now, we also have, coming back to the course chapters, we also have 3 chapters on GraphQL, serverless, asynchronous programming, and API development in general. We also have 3 chapters on DynamoDB and NoSQL itself, and we go detail into all of these. We have 1 chapter about how do we secure our app with the authorization and authentication techniques. We also discuss about performance profiling, where how do we make our front end and back end faster. And then from chapter 13 to 19, we have the entire hands-on project where we build the large application based on the learnings from these previous chapters. So I will sort of pick and choose a few of the chapters just to show how the learning actually goes through. For example, if we go to, let's say, the serverless one, and you can see we have these 7 lessons, including, for example, the introduction to serverless, the introduction to asynchronous programming in JavaScript in general, where we talk about event loops. And for example, let me show you the animations that we have for event loops, how we explain those with a piece of code and the animation of the JS call stack, the queues, and we have the explanatory discussions in the left. So you can go through them on your pace. You can go back and forth between the highlights to understand these details and more. Now, the design and the preview of the course doesn't end there. We have a lot more. For example, if we go through here, you can see how we discuss promises, and then we actually step by step animate that code to explain that understanding in a more interactive and clean detail. Now, If we go to, for example, any other, and this particular course has a lot more. We talk about the serverless framework, the serverless data YML, how to understand that, how do we build GraphQL API with serverless, with AWS Lambda, how do we deploy it, all those details. So let me show you arbitrarily, let's say, the DynamoDB design patterns chapter. And in this particular case, we discussed about the differences between NoSQL and SQL and when to choose which one. And with we define about the access patterns first design, and you can see each of those are highlighted and designed along with explanations here. And not only that, you can also see here we talk about when we should use SQL databases and when we shouldn't use that. So we have these nice animations about how NoSQL databases actually collate the data together, and then the access patterns actually cut through that data. Now let's go through, for example, which are the, I think, the most important, interesting ones are the chapters on the project itself. So we have the starting chapter about the design and planning. So in the first chapter itself, for the introduction, we actually went through the whole flow of development process. That means we start with the prototyping the project. Here we then go through the designing the UX, then designing the database access patterns, and then coming back to the front end where we design the front end but with dummy data, and then we design the back end with dummy data, and then we integrate them so that the front end provides data. It's still dummy, but it comes through the app, through the API. And finally, we implement the database access patterns. That way, we actually in the front end provide the real data, and then we move to quality assurance testing, performance profiling of the app, and even some operational cost analysis as well. And you can see this particular course has all those with this particular project in it. Now, interestingly, in this particular way of showcasing the development process, we also go through the low fidelity prototype, how to build them, and you can see this red dot sort of follows through, and you can zoom in and everything, and you can see how we describe how to design this and how to make sure we are in scope and the deliverables are well defined and all those details. Let's go through, for example, designing the backend API, how the GraphQL, because we use GraphQL, let's see how the GraphQL looks like. The interesting part here is when we say, for example, we need a query for getting all the vending machines. We may not remember how that particular mockup looked like. So we actually have that mockup as a reference here as well for faster learning. And you can see we have these machines to be the query that we want to build, and we actually build that step by step with the inputs, with the what are the fields, what are the subfields, and everything. Similarly, for every single query that we build, we highlight, we discuss, and not only that, we show the front-end mockup for which we are building these queries. This goes along even in the database access patterns, for example, where we show each of these patterns, just the ones that we saw right now, the get all machines. This is the primary key. This is the GraphQL query that we want to support with this access pattern. This kind of overall previews and assisted ways of understanding details goes across the entire course. So I will not go through, for example, 14, 15, 16, where we actually build those products. For example, let me just open 16 for a second. So here we are actually building the product with real content, which means that we actually integrate the backend, we actually secure it with Cognito, we set up the database access patterns. So in this case, for example, if you, it's a large chapter, so you can see we highlight the code, we build this, we show the structure of the code as well. For example, when we set things up, if we go a little bit up there, so it's a huge course with highlights and details and all the bells and whistles. But essentially, you can see we even have quality assurance testing, where we talk about how to run quality assurance test in a rigorous way. So the development is just part of the story, right? So we have to make sure the testings are done. So all of that, highlighting all of the details, setting up quality assurance, setting it up for backend, setting it up for front end. We discuss the dev stage prod workflow, how they should look like in terms of QA testing, integrated with QA testing. And then we also talk about each of the query or mutation that we have designed. How do we actually go through and test all of them? Sometimes twice, because once you update one of them, you may have to come back to another query and check if that is still working correctly. So we go through all of that and we show how the GraphQL playground, for example, how it should look like and all of those details. We even have, and we will not go through that, operational cost analysis, like how many DynamoDB calls we should expect per query, per mutation. How do we divide all these queries and mutations into which ones are rarely called, which ones are very often called. For example, for a vending machine or inventory management system that we are building, uh, the sales mutation will be called way more frequently than, let's say, creating a machine, adding a machine. So all of those details are explained in detail, and we hope that in this through this journey we would be able to learn about not just the technologies, but actually how to use this technology to build real world products and build scalable products that are used in production and can be scaled to millions of users. You can also find out all the updates we have. So we make sure that the content is always up to date. So this is the general availability for modern full stack today, but we will be updating the course with AWS SDK version 3. We have already started that with chapter 16, but the rest of the chapters were written with version 2, but version 3 came like a couple of few weeks ago. So we are actually implementing those, rewriting those chapters with version 3 as well. So you can be assured that all the content will be kept fresh so that you can always come back and reference the ways to quickly check, let's say, a DynamoDB call, say SQS call, and all the best practices and details. With that, we would like to pause, and we hope you enjoy this course as much as we have enjoyed building this. And there will be more courses coming soon in this particular space, probably in a completely different segment like Elasticsearch, SQL database, building an analytical piece of application. But more details will come soon, and you can stay updated in this particular page or in our Twitter as well. Thank you.